Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The administration, along with Britain and Europe, introducing a raft of sanctions targeting Russian banks, business elites or oligarchs and their families, even President Putin and the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time.
NATO activating its rapid response force for the first time in a defensive role in Europe. Up to 40,000 troops to bolster allied countries close to Russia and Ukraine, and 7,000 American troops ordered to Europe could soon make up part of this.
There is no doubt about NATO's readiness to protect and defend all allies.
But the troops will not be going to Ukraine. The West's response exposes the limitations of confronting the world's second most powerful nuclear nation. Today, the Ukrainian people may have the world's support and more weapons, but they're in this fight alone. Now, a US official telling ABC News a $350 million package of lethal defensive aid will also include portable surface-to-air missiles. The last time America sent such weapons to help America's enemies was during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. Welcome to the new Cold War. Well, George, we've now got this news that the two sides are going to meet at the border between Belarus and Ukraine, although it's hard to see what common ground could exist while Russian troops are on the offensive inside Ukraine. We also have this deeply worrying statement from Vladimir Putin. He's talking about aggressive NATO action, and he's putting his strategic defense forces on a state of heightened readiness. It certainly sounds like nuclear saber-rattling. George?
Certainly does. Ian Pennell, thanks very much. Let's take that to Moscow right now. James Longman is there. And James, what more do we know about this order from Vladimir Putin?
Well, George, this does feel like it takes things to a whole new level. He is ordering a strategic defense force into what is called a special regime of combat duty. It's essentially nuclear readiness, but it is, one hopes, intended only as a threat. You get the sense his invasion isn't going as quickly as he'd hoped, and with all the support for Ukraine, Vladimir Putin is perhaps increasingly frustrated. George?
It certainly does sound ominous, though, to be putting your nuclear forces on heightened alert. And, James, you've also been noticing some more signs of dissent inside Russia.
Yeah, the government is continuing its pretense that they're only taking limited military action, and Putin has been thanking Russian troops for doing their duty, only mentioning the Donbass rather than the full-scale invasion that is actually underway. The Kremlin is really going to find it harder and harder to keep the truth from its own people. Moscow tends to hide the impact on its armed forces, so now the Ukrainians actually launched a website to help Russian families find their relatives killed in combat. That's just one way the truth of this situation is slowly leaking into Russia despite state media control. The economic impact of sanctions is also alerting people here to the seriousness of this situation. Since the ruble sank, $7 billion has already been withdrawn from the banks. Things like electronics are rocketing in price. Car parts are harder to find. Travel is going to be very difficult. Businesses are also asking more and more for cash because they're concerned about their bank accounts. A former Russian central bank official has actually said that things might be a catastrophe on the Russian currency market on Monday, tomorrow, when trading opens. And this is as the crackdown on dissent here continues. One human rights monitor estimates that 3,000 people have now been arrested in protests here. Today is, by the way, the 7-year anniversary of the assassination of opposition leader Boris Nemtsov. He was gunned down right in front of the Kremlin here behind me. The big question: will more people, as so many have already done, risk their lives coming out in the streets in big numbers? We've seen more barricades going up around the Kremlin. The authorities here certainly feel they might. George?
James Longman, thanks very much. Let's go to Washington right now. Chief White House correspondent Cecilia Vega. And Cecilia, President Biden and our allies are doing more now to crack down on Russia.
Yeah, George, we in fact could be looking at some of the strictest sanctions in modern history. What they're doing right now has really been described as the financial nuclear weapon. So they're cutting off Russia from this SWIFT banking system. Essentially, it allows big banks, large banks, to send international transactions. They're still working out the details, but essentially we could be talking about ultimately crushing Russia's ability to do so much of its business beyond its own borders. Perhaps even bigger than that, though, George, is this targeting of Russia's central bank. This is a really big deal because it's targeting this some $600 billion that Russia has set aside to sort of sanction-proof its economy. And on top of that, now listen to this, officials are talking about targeting some of the richest Russians, freezing their assets in the West. And they are being really explicit about this. They're saying they're going after their yachts, their mansions, their mega luxury apartments, even their ability to send their children to fancy colleges in the West. So really, we're seeing the West, this administration and its allies cast this really wide net, going after Putin himself, going after those close to him, but also, as James was just saying, really hitting the Russian economy so much that Putin could be facing some pretty serious political backlash there at home in Moscow. And the point right now, George, they're really trying to push Moscow to this point, almost looking at the Iran model, turning it into a huge pariah on the international stage.
More military aid for the Ukrainians as well.
Yeah, this is a really big deal. That new package, Ian mentioned $350 million in this latest package, $1 billion total overall in this crisis. Ukrainian leaders had been pleading for more weapons, particularly those that would allow them to target planes and helicopters, Russians in the sky. The U.S. had been hesitating to send these surface-to-air missiles, partly out of fear of provoking Russia. Certainly that changed. The big question this morning, though, is how they're going to get those weapons to Ukraine, given the situation there right now on the ground. And one other huge move to tell you about, George, Germany with a big reversal, reversing this policy to not send lethal aid to conflict zones. Right now, they are agreeing to help Ukraine with some big weapons. So that front line there, they're about to get a lot of firepower, George.
Cecilia Vega, thanks very much. Let's bring in the Ukraine ambassador to the United States right now, Oksana Markarova. Ambassador Markarova, thank you for joining us this morning. What are you hearing from the top levels of your government this morning about the situation inside Ukraine?
Thank you very much for having us. Well, it's another difficult, hard night and day that we had in Ukraine with Russian forces shelling at Ukrainian cities, Kyiv, Kharkiv. The initial offensive and blitzkrieg was not successful. So we have Russian troops now all over the place, and they're using missiles and heavy artillery and these troops around the country to essentially target the civilian infrastructure, hospitals. We now see the kindergartens. I mean, nothing is off limit to them. So what we see is a full-fledged war with war crimes on the ground. And as you saw, Ukraine yesterday already filed a suit in The Hague, and we are collecting and gathering all of this. But again, Ukrainian spirit is growing every day. We all are united around our president and around our armed forces in defending our home. We don't have any other alternative.
Is President Zelensky safe?
He's as safe as our country, and that's the choice he made, to stay in Kyiv, to stay in Ukraine, and lead the nation in this very difficult moment.
What more can you tell us about this offer that now the president has accepted to send negotiators to the border of Belarus to meet with Russian negotiators?
Well, look, the devastation from the Russian actions and the war crimes is huge. And our president, from the beginning, even before the war started, always was focused on the diplomatic solution. And even after they started the war, he actually called for peace talks all the time. But he always said, we are ready for peace talks, we are not ready to surrender. So, of course, we are ready for any peace talks that would stop the war and would get them out from our country. But it's too early to talk now.
Is it fair to say that is the president prepared to forsake any membership in NATO in return for peace?
I don't think, first of all, we have to understand here that neither NATO nor any other false pretext or lies that Russian Federation government is spreading is the real reason why they attacked us. They attacked us because they always wanted to destroy us, because free, democratic, and sovereign Ukraine is a threat to them. We're a peaceful country, we never attack them, but they cannot allow us to be independent and just to live our own lives. That's why they attacked us in 2014. That's why for the past 8 years, they've done everything to pressure us into this, and that's why now they started the war. But again, in Ukraine, all Ukrainians, whether we speak Ukrainian or Russian, whatever nationalities we are all united right now around one simple idea. We want to be independent, we want to be sovereign, We want to restore our territorial integrity, and we just want Russians to get out from our country and not kill us. I mean, the Russian army. And they are demotivated. I mean, you spoke earlier today about them surrendering, and our Ministry of Internal Affairs put out publicly information about those who are in captivity now, and we treat them well, unlike how Russians treat our citizens and civilians, killing children. We've lost already so many children. Just recently, a whole family was shot in the car. But, you know, and also people who they lost, more than 4,000 Russians will never go back home because they were sent to kill us.
Overnight, we've seen new sanctions from the West. We've seen new sanctions from the United States, more military aid coming from Western nations. What more do the citizen soldiers and the forces of Ukraine need right now?
Well, we're very grateful for all the support. We know it's our job to defend our country. It's our home and we will defend it. But we need more defensive weapons. We are grateful for everything that is there already and that is about to come, and we need more because we are defending our country against a very strong enemy. We also need sanctions, more sanctions. And we need Russia to clearly see that and feel that it's not okay in the 21st century to attack another country, a sovereign country, without any reason. And I also would like to use this opportunity also to call on American business, because, you know, this is a full-fledged unjust war. And I think it's time for many American businesses also to think. I know how hard it is, and I know this is business interest. As the former Minister of Finance, I understand. But I think it's time to think about saving reputations and not cooperating with a regime that will end up in The Hague for everything they've done and they're doing now to Ukraine.
Boycotting Russian vodka, not enough?
Definitely not enough. You know, Ukraine is a country that that went through horrible times in the previous century. We had lost so many of our Jewish brothers and sisters in Holocaust on our territory. And one of the very famous survivors of Holocaust, Elie Wiesel, said that you always have to take sides because the silence or neutrality always help the oppressor and never those that are oppressed. So it's time to take sides, and it's time to take Ukrainian side because we are defending our home. We were peaceful, we never planned any offensives, we didn't attack anyone, and we were attacked.
Ambassador Markarova, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Let's bring in White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki right now. Jen, thank you for joining us this morning. I want to begin with that announcement we just heard. Good morning. We just heard out of Russia, Vladimir Putin putting his nuclear forces on a state of higher readiness. What will the U.S. response be?
Well, first of all, George, this is really a pattern that we've seen from President Putin through the course of this conflict, which is manufacturing threats that don't exist in order to justify further aggression. And the global community and the American people should look at it through that prism. We've seen him do this time and time again. At no point has Russia been under threat from NATO, has Russia been under threat from Ukraine. This is all a pattern from President Putin, and we're going to stand up for it. We have the ability to defend ourselves, but we also need to call out what we're seeing here from President Putin.
You just heard Ambassador Markarova speak. She said you're very grateful. The Ukrainians are very grateful for the assistance they've received so far from the United States, from the West. They're grateful for the imposition of sanctions, but they need more sanctions and more military aid. Is that coming?
Certainly, we are open to providing additional assistance, George. I know that earlier in the program you talked a bit about the security package that we approved and announced over the course of the last 24 hours. That provides a significant amount of additional security assistance to the Ukrainian people, to the Ukrainian leadership. In addition, we'll continue to provide a range of humanitarian assistance and economic assistance. I would note that the sanctions that we announced yesterday are on par, put Russia on par with Iran, cutting them off from a banking system with the global community. We have now also sanctioned 80% of their banks and their financial sector. This makes it very difficult for President Putin and the Russian government not only to do business, but also to help fund a greater expansion of their military and greater expansion of innovation in their country. So we have taken severe steps already, but of course there's more we can always consider doing.
Senator Tom Cotton is coming up on the program next. He says the United States should be doing more to crack down on the Russian energy sector. Here's what he had to say.
How about we impose those sanctions, but we lift all those restrictions on the production of American oil and gas so we can start drilling on federal lands again and putting out new leases, so we can reopen the Keystone Pipeline, which would bring more oil into America every day from Canada than we import every day from Russia.
President open to those proposals?
Well, first, George, I think on the energy sector, the way that the President Biden has approached sanctions is we want to take every step to maximize the impact and the consequences on President Putin while minimizing the impact on the American people and the global community. And so energy sanctions are certainly on the table. We have not taken those off, but we also want to do that and make sure we're minimizing the impact on the global marketplace and do it in a united way. I would say that the congressman's recommendations there, the Keystone Pipeline was not processing oil through the system. That does not solve any problems. That's a misdiagnosis, or maybe a misdiagnosis of what needs to happen. I would also note that on oil leases, what this actually justifies, in President Biden's view, is the fact that we need to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, on oil in general, and we need to look at other ways of having energy in our country and others. One of the interesting things, George, we've seen over the last week or so is that a number of European countries are recognizing they need to reduce their own reliance on Russian oil. So I'm not sure we agree with that assessment of what needs to happen, but energy sanctions remain on the table.
I know the president has spoken to President Zelensky. Is he confident he's safe?
He has been in close touch. While not getting into his security, the security of President Zelensky, I'm just going to note, George, as the American people have seen and tuned into, he is standing up courageously against the invasion of President Putin and Russian leadership, leading his country and continuing to. When President Biden spoke with him, the last conversation he had with him, President Zelensky asked for additional security assistance. That's exactly what we delivered, and we will remain in close contact with him. But President Biden is maintaining, a line of communication with him, as we all are.
There are more and more questions cropping up about the mental state of Vladimir Putin right now. We saw the former U.S. Ambassador Michael McFaul say he's not acting in a rational manner. I want to show a tweet we got from Marco Rubio this week saying, I wish I could share more, but for now I can say it's pretty obvious to many that something is off with Putin. He has always been a killer, but his problem now is different and significant. It would be a mistake to assume this Putin would react the same way he would have 5 years ago. Is it the belief of the United States government right now that Vladimir Putin is mentally unbalanced in some way?
Well, without getting into his mental imbalance or stability, what I will say, George, is anyone who watched the speech he gave last week, whether it's Senator Rubio or all of us sitting in the White House, what we heard from President Putin at that time was somebody who was not only justifying the invasion of a sovereign country, but clearly had ambitions beyond that. And one of the mistakes we probably all make is looking at this through the prism of global norms and what the global community believes is behavior that people should operate through as leaders in the world. That is not how he sees the world. He's obviously been quite isolated during COVID. You saw him have a back and forth with even his intel chief last week. So I'm not going to make an assessment of his mental stability, but I will tell you certainly the rhetoric, the actions, the justification that he's making for his actions are certainly deeply concerning to us.
Finally, the president is approaching his State of the Union in a pretty difficult political position right now. 37% approval rating. Democrats trailing badly in the midterm polling. A majority in our recent poll out this morning even questioned the president's mental capacity. How is he going to turn that around on Tuesday night? And how much has his State of the Union been changed by this war in Ukraine?
Well, George, I think there's no question that in the State of the Union, the American people and anybody watching around the world will hear the president talk about the efforts he has led over the past several months to build a global coalition to fight against the autocracy and the efforts of President Putin to invade a foreign country. That is certainly something that is present in all of our lives and certainly in the president's life in this moment. But what people will also hear from President Biden is his optimism and his belief in the resilience of the American people and the strength of the American people. And you know, George, from covering State of the Unions for some time, that it is about delivering a message to the public at a moment in time. And if you look back when President Obama gave his first State of the Union, it was during the worst financial crisis in a generation. When President Bush gave his first State of the Union, it was shortly after 9/11. Leaders lead during crises. That's exactly what President Biden is doing. He'll speak to that, but he's also going to speak about his optimism about what's ahead and what we all have to look forward to.
Jen Psaki, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, George.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself in jeopardy for us.
This is the story of Elizabeth Holmes.
You got intrigued to see fantasy. It's all there.
Can't peel your eyes away.
Any comments, Elizabeth? Any comments, Elizabeth?
God bless you, girl boss.
The new man in her life, the new baby, and now as Elizabeth Holmes awaits sentencing, what you haven't seen, haven't heard.
Behind the scenes, it was an absolute mess.
My jaw dropped.
Part of the human trait, being fascinated by a train wreck.
I was blown away.
The new 2020 Friday night on ABC.
Okay, now, I love me some GMA so much. Time for me to do, well, a little GMA-ish promo. Ready? GMA 7A every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Bring your friends.
Yes, now we're talking. That's how you start the day. With Robin, George, Michael, and GMA. Starting sharp at 7A every day. So go on. Just say,
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. You know it's America's #1 morning show, people.
Bring your friends.
24 Hours, Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi! Is this mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day. I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby. It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
This is American history. A violent white mob, a brutal attack, 300 black Americans killed right here in America. Now, it is time to uncover Tulsa's buried truth. The gripping story brought to light in a new podcast from ABC News. Available now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
There's a live look at Kyiv right now. As we just heard, it is under shelling this morning, although we're not seeing it right there, but it is some intense shelling overnight in the city of Kyiv. We're joined now by Republican Senator Tom Cotton. Senator Cotton, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's begin with what we heard from the Ukrainian ambassador. Said she was grateful for what she's gotten from the United States and the West so far, but more sanctions, more military aid is essential. What should the United States be giving right now?
George, the Ukrainian ambassador is a lot. There's a lot more we can do. I first want to join all Arkansans in expressing my prayers and our support for the brave Ukrainians who are repulsing Vladimir Putin's naked, unprovoked war of aggression. You've seen Ukrainian army elements overmatched with armor and air power repulsing these attacks on Kyiv and Kharkiv and other cities. We've seen moms with their kids making Molotov cocktails, George. Grandmas and grandpas who are reporting for to get AK so they can fight as well. But we can do more than prayers and hashtags and lighting up buildings, George. It's time for the president and some of our European partners to quit pussyfooting around. The financial sanctions announced last night are riddled with loopholes. I know that they say they've sanctioned 80% of the banks in Russia. Well, Vladimir Putin controls 100% of the banks in Russia. He can use the other 20% to continue to finance his war machine. It's time to remove all Russian financial institutions from the international payment system. It's time to impose sanctions on his oil and gas exports, which he uses as his primary means of financial support. We need to rush those weapons that were announced for delivery yesterday to the front. Anti-tank, anti-aircraft missiles, sniper rifles, ammunition, fuel supplies. It should have been done weeks ago, so better late than never, but the Ukrainians have no time. They have no time, George. There is
How about
not
this call?
a minute to lose, and we need to stand with them.
How about this call from the Ukrainian ambassador for American businesses, the American people to do more?
American businesses can do more, George. We don't have nearly the same kind of financial ties to Russia as European businesses do, but I would encourage every American company to scrub all of their operations, to provide no support whatsoever to Vladimir Putin's regime as he's conducting this unprovoked war of aggression. There is more that we can all do. That starts this week in Washington, where we can provide more immediate assistance in terms of weapons and financial support to the Ukrainian regime and imposing truly severe sanctions on Vladimir Putin, not the half measures that we continue to see.
We saw this announcement from Vladimir Putin this morning that he's put his nuclear forces on a state of heightened alert right now. You saw my exchange with Jen Psaki right there. Is Vladimir Putin acting in a rational manner? Is he mentally there? Or, as your colleague Senator Rubio said, something is off right now?
George, I'm not going to play psychologist from 7,000 miles away. I will say this. What Vladimir Putin said on Monday night was not a surprise. He published the exact same arguments about Ukraine in an essay last summer. That's why I've been urging the administration to take the threat that Putin posed to Ukraine and international peace and stability seriously, to start imposing these sanctions weeks and months ago, to start sending these missiles and weapons and ammunition to Ukraine weeks ago. Ms. Psaki said that we all made the mistake of viewing Vladimir Putin as someone who sees the world through global norms. George, I never made that mistake. I've always seen Vladimir Putin as a ruthless dictator who wants to reassemble the greater Russian Empire. And he took the imperial ambitions he's always had and what he perceived as hesitancy and indecision on the part of the West and went for the jugular earlier this week. Thankfully, the brave Ukrainian people are fighting back, and every day they can hold out, George. They continue to stiffen the spines of leaders in the West. So we need to urge them on, and we need to continue providing them the weapons they need to fight back.
You've never made that mistake. It is true. You've been stalwart in your opposition to Vladimir Putin. The same cannot be said for the leader of your party, Donald Trump. Last night, he finally condemned the invasion, but he also repeated his praise of Putin, calling him smart. Earlier in the week, he called him pretty smart. He called him savvy. He says NATO and the U.S. are dumb. Are you prepared to condemn that kind of rhetoric from the leader of your party?
George, you've heard what I have to say about Vladimir Putin, that he is a ruthless dictator who's launched a naked, unprovoked war of aggression. Thankfully, the Ukrainian army has anti-tank missiles that President Obama would not supply, that we did supply last time Republicans were in charge in Washington. That's why it's so urgent that we continue to supply those weapons to Ukraine.
Why can't you condemn Donald Trump for those comments?
George, if you want to know what Donald Trump thinks about Vladimir Putin or any other topic, I'd encourage you to invite him on your show. I don't speak on behalf of other politicians. They can speak for themselves. I speak on behalf of Arkansans, who I talked to this week and who are appalled at what they saw in Ukraine, and they want me right now to fight in Washington to support those brave Ukrainians.
You're a senior member of the Republican Party. Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. He said last night again, suggested that he would be running for president. When Fox News asked him if he had a message for Vladimir Putin, he said he has no message. Why can't you condemn that? I feel quite confident that if Barack Obama or Joe Biden said something like that, you'd be first in line to criticize him.
Again, George, if you want to talk to the former president about his views or his message, you can have him on your show. My message to Vladimir Putin is quite clear. He needs to leave Ukraine unless he wants to face moms and teenagers with Molotov cocktails and grandmothers and grandfathers with AK-47s for years to come. I'm speaking on behalf of all Arkansans who want me to send that message to him.
If Donald Trump runs again, can you support him?
George, I'm not worried about this fall's election right now, much less an election 2 years from now. I'm focused on the naked war of aggression that Vladimir Putin has launched in Ukraine right now. There's not a moment to lose. We can worry about electoral politics down the road.
Former President Trump was out there talking about it last night. I simply don't understand why you can't condemn his praise of Vladimir Putin.
George, again, I don't speak on behalf of other politicians. They can all speak for themselves. I'm delivering my message to you, which I said has been clear, whether Barack Obama was president, whether Donald Trump was president, and now whether Joe Biden was president, that Vladimir Putin has been a ruthless dictator for years. Too many people have not taken the threat seriously, and that's why you see the images we see in Ukraine now. And where we need to focus is on stopping that aggression, supporting the Ukrainians as best we can.
Senator Cotton, thanks for your time this morning.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States.
It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself in jeopardy for us.
Christopher Steele.
The guy who picked a fight with 2 presidents, and he's lived to tell the tale.
That now infamous dossier.
Supposedly a tape showing prostitutes hired by Donald Trump urinating on a bed, and would be quite a tape if it in fact existed.
I said take out the PP tape.
It quickly became a question of how much of this was accurate.
This is the stuff of movies.
A lot of this is the stuff of movies. The story of epic proportions.
Phony stuff.
It's a bunch of crap.
It changed history.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi! This mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day. I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby.
It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family. I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
When you think of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, I'm sorry, it's the Jen Shah Show.
Ain't no party like a Jen Shah party, because a Jen Shah party don't stop. Hey! Diva.
Drama.
Money and fame.
Unpredictable.
Unhinged.
Crazier than anyone could have guessed.
She was giving us the money. She was giving us the looks. It seemed like she was the prime housewife.
But
then suddenly, OMG. We've seen a lot of things on The Real Housewives, but we've never seen anyone be arrested.
Real Housewives of Salt Lake City reality show star facing serious allegations.
let's unpack this.
The whole time she was filming the show, law enforcement was investigating her.
I don't know if she knew that she was going to be arrested that day. But those braids, honey, those braids look good.
Money, money, money.
She's accused of an elaborate fraud scheme.
A huge telemarketing fraud. Speaking with the victims was heart-wrenching.
If I can talk to the people that scam me, I would say, would you do this to your mother?
Jen Shah pled not guilty to the charges that she's facing.
Her defenses are that she's not the one that is selling these other services. She's just providing leads. She shouldn't be criminally liable.
Jen going to trial is going to be really, really...
Shah amazing, wild.
Y'all can keep getting pissed off. I don't care. Block me.
She did say that she's the Wizard of Oz, the woman behind the curtain. I think she's the Wicked Witch of the West.
'Cause money, money, money make my world go round.
Unpredictable rich woman. Sign me up.
Money, money, money.
Hello?
Judge Jackson?
Yes.
This is Joe Biden. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you, Mr. President?
Well, you're going to be more wonderful. I'd like you to go to the Supreme Court. How about that?
Sir, I would be so honored.
Well, I'm honored to nominate you.
I am just so overwhelmed.
Well, you deserve it. You deserve it.
We are so grateful. Thank you, Mr. President.
That's something new. I don't think we've ever seen a phone call like that before. Let's talk about it on our roundtable, joined by Donna Brazile, Sarah Isgur, veteran of the Trump Justice Department, now an ABC News analyst, our chief Washington correspondent, John Karl, our chief congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, and Donna Brazile. Let me begin with you. That appointment by President Biden, a promise kept, history made.
George, I'm overjoyed just hearing it. I saw the picture of the two of them in the Oval Office, and I sent that around yesterday because I'm like, when are we going to see this again in our lifetime? I never expected it, but here's what I know. She's very qualified, confirmed by the United States Senate 3 times with bipartisan support. The proud graduate of Miami Palmetto High School, the daughter of 2 public school teachers. She has worked very hard. 9 years of experience on federal courts, clerking for Justice Breyer, 2 lower court judges. She is, I think, she is going to perform very well once she's able to do her rounds. She's a unifying force.
Rachel Scott, now the confirmation battle ahead. You cover up on Congress. The rounds begin this week.
It begins this week. Judge Jackson will start meeting with senators on Capitol Hill. And listen, I was talking to sources over at the White House. I think that they would like some bipartisan support on this, but they are certainly not counting on it. The president, though, is quietly courting Republican senators. I'm actually told by a source he called Senator Susan Collins before this announcement went public, informing her of his pick. pick. And of course, she's one of 3 Republicans that actually supported Judge Jackson's confirmation to the D.C. Circuit. That also included Senator Lindsey Graham, and he has come out sort of blasting her record. But the reality here is that Republicans really don't have very much leverage here to fight this. They changed the rules back in 2017, lowering the threshold. This pick can be confirmed by a simple majority, 51 votes. So Democrats can push this through on their own, George.
That's right. And John, Carl, even though Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin have not been on board with the president's Build Back Better plan, they're not going to block this.
No, he has the votes to get her confirmed, barring something unforeseen. But, George, think about this. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is somebody who clerked for the justice she is going to replace, assuming she is confirmed. She clerked for Stephen Breyer. All signs are she would be a justice in the model of Stephen Breyer. Stephen Breyer was confirmed 87-9, overwhelmingly gaining the support of Republicans in the Senate. This time around, she'll be lucky to get any Republican votes, possibly a handful. We did hear from Mitt Romney, who did not vote for her last year for the circuit court, saying that she is a qualified jurist, an experienced jurist, and acknowledging that her nomination will inspire many Americans. So the question here, George, is how hard do Republicans fight, and how ugly will it get? We heard from Mitch McConnell saying that this will be respectful. He says they won't do, in his words, what Democrats did to Kavanaugh. We'll see if other Republicans will go along with that.
Sarah Isgur, you're a veteran of these fights. What's your sense of where the party's going to go on this?
Look, she's unquestionably qualified, and luckily also for her, in some ways, this is the most inconsequential Supreme Court nomination of my lifetime.
Not going to change the balance on the court.
Not going to change the balance of the court. She's well within sort of the Breyer to Sotomayor range there, and Republicans have the wind at their backs when it comes to 2022. The last thing they want is to get stuck in the mire of a Supreme Court nomination. They want this to be a referendum on Joe Biden. Now, the problem is that may be the interest of the overall party. Individual senators on the Senate Judiciary have their own incentives to try to, you know, spruce up their name ID that they're fighters. You know, I think the #1 question she'll face from Republicans is actually not that much about her. It's you are one of the most qualified judges in the country to be on the Supreme Court, but a lot of people who are qualified weren't even considered for this position because of their race. Do you think that that's right?
Does she get Republican votes?
Yes.
Donna, let's talk about the State of the Union. You saw the question I asked Jen Psaki earlier. The president is coming into the State of the Union, pretty tough position, 37% approval. The Democrats are facing real headwinds heading into the midterms. What does he need to do Tuesday night?
Well, first of all, George, I call it 20-80-80. 20% looking back, 40% talking about the president. I mean, he is going to come before the nation at a time when there are dark clouds of war in Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe. So he's going to have to talk about the present crisis, not just in Ukraine, but also inflation, also what's happening at the gas pump. He also needs to do 40% in terms of the future. Where do we go from here? I mean, he's passed several important pieces of legislation. Where do we go on the pandemic? Where do we go in terms of, you know, competitiveness with China? There's a lot on his plate, but the first thing he should do is not talk to the men and women in Congress. I love them. You know, I used to be a Hill staffer. Talk to the American people because they want to hear from their president and project strength.
That is the biggest opportunity for every president, every single year. It's a huge audience. How does the president capture it?
I think the worst thing the president can do is stand up there and tell the American people something that is not their reality. If he stands up there and says the state of our union is strong, people are going to roll their eyes. And at a time where his approval numbers are not only low, but they're getting lower, he needs to stand up there and level with the American people and let them recognize that he understands reality. The state of our union is challenged. It's not great. Inflation, gas prices, Ukraine. Recognize that reality and bring the American people with him about how tough this is.